The dust from the stagecoach had barely settled when Beatrice Garrett heard her father's voice boom through the thin walls of their homestead, and she knew with a sinking certainty that her life was about to change in ways she could not control. She pressed her back against the rough wooden planks outside the parlor window, her heart hammering as she listened to the conversation between her father and the man who had traveled all the way from Denver to discuss terms of marriage with a woman he had never met. "The dowry must be transferred before the ceremony," said a voice she did not recognize, clipped and businesslike. "I have investments that require immediate capital, and I cannot afford to wait until after the wedding. Your daughter will want for nothing once we are married, but I need those funds now." Beatrice closed her eyes, fighting the nausea that rose in her throat. She had known this day would come eventually. Her father had been hinting at it for months, ever since the silver mine he had invested everything into had collapsed, leaving them with debts that threatened to swallow their small ranch whole. Marriage to a wealthy man had seemed like a distant inevitability, something she could push to the back of her mind while she focused on caring for her younger siblings and managing the household after her mother's death 3 years prior. But this was different. This was immediate and real, and the man inside was demanding her entire dowry before he would even commit to marrying her. Every instinct in her body screamed that something was wrong. "That is highly irregular, Mr. Patterson," her father said, though his voice lacked conviction. "The dowry is traditionally transferred upon marriage, not before." "These are not traditional times, Mr. Garrett. You came to me seeking a solution to your financial difficulties. I'm offering one. Your daughter will have a comfortable life in Denver, far from this dusty mining town and the creditors who are circling your property like vultures. But I need capital now, and I am willing to take on a wife to secure it. Those are my terms." Beatrice felt her hands curl into fists. She had never met this Mr. Patterson, but she already knew everything she needed to know about him. He saw her as a transaction, a means to an end. The money her grandmother had left her, the small inheritance that was supposed to give her some security and independence, would disappear into his business ventures before they ever spoke their vows. And if something went wrong, if he decided he no longer wanted to marry her after taking her money, she would be left with nothing. She could not let that happen. Moving quietly away from the window, Beatrice walked around to the front of the house and slipped inside through the kitchen door. Her younger sister Margaret looked up from where she was kneading bread dough, her 14-year-old face creased with worry. "Is it true?" Margaret whispered. "Father said there was a man coming to discuss your marriage." "It is true," Beatrice confirmed, keeping her voice steady for her sister's sake. "But I need you to do something for me. I need you to pack a small bag with some of my clothes and whatever food you can spare from the pantry. Can you do that without Father noticing?" Margaret's eyes widened. "You're going to leave?" "I do not know yet, but I need to be prepared." Beatrice squeezed her sister's flour-dusted hand. "Trust me, I will not abandon you, but I cannot marry a man who is only interested in my inheritance. There has to be another way." She left Margaret in the kitchen and made her way upstairs to her small bedroom, where she kept the metal lockbox containing the documents related to her dowry. Her grandmother had been specific in her will. The money was meant for Beatrice alone, to be used as she saw fit. It was not meant to bail out her father's poor investments or to finance some stranger's business dealings. Beatrice pulled the lockbox from beneath her bed and opened it with the key she wore on a chain around her neck. Inside were the bank documents, property deeds, and a substantial amount of cash that her grandmother had saved over her lifetime. It was not a fortune by any means, but it was enough to give Beatrice options. Enough to start a small business, purchase property, or support herself independently if she chose not to marry. She was staring at the contents of the box when she heard heavy footsteps on the stairs. Her father appeared in the doorway, his weathered face lined with exhaustion and something that looked like shame. "Beatrice," he said quietly, "I need to speak with you." "I heard everything," she replied, not bothering to pretend otherwise. "And I will not do it. I will not hand over my inheritance to a man I have never met on the promise that he will marry me afterward. That money is mine, Father. Grandmother left it to me." Her father's shoulders sagged. "I know what I am asking is difficult, but we are out of options, Bea. The creditors are threatening to seize the ranch. Your brother and sister will have nowhere to go. This marriage could save all of us. Or it could leave me penniless and unmarried while Mr. Patterson takes my money and disappears," Beatrice countered. You know as well as I do that what he is asking is not normal. No respectable man demands a dowry before marriage. It is a scheme, father, and I will not be part of it." "Then what do you suggest?" her father asked, his voice rising with frustration. "We have no other prospects, no other way to pay these debts. Unless you have suddenly developed the ability to pull gold from the ground, I do not see what choice we have." Beatrice stood, clutching the lockbox to her chest. "I need time to think. Tell Mr. Patterson that I need to consider his proposal. Give me a few days." Her father looked like he wanted to argue, but something in her expression must have convinced him. He nodded slowly. 3 days. That is all I can give you. The creditors will not wait longer than that." After he left, Beatrice sat on her bed and tried to think through her options. She could refuse the marriage outright, but that would leave her family destitute. She could agree to Mr. Patterson's terms and hope that he was an honorable man, but every instinct told her that was a dangerous gamble. Or she could leave, take her inheritance and start over somewhere else, but that would mean abandoning her siblings to an uncertain fate. None of the options were good. That evening, after helping Margaret prepare a simple supper and putting her young brother to bed, Beatrice slipped out of the house and walked into Silverton proper. The July sun was setting behind the mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple that would have been beautiful if her mind had not been so troubled. The town was bustling despite the late hour, with miners and ranch hands filling the saloons and general stores after a long day's work. Beatrice made her way to the telegraph office, hoping to send a message to her aunt in Santa Fe. Perhaps her mother's sister would have some advice or could offer temporary shelter while Beatrice figured out her next steps. But when she arrived, the office was closed, a sign on the door indicating that the telegraph operator had been called away on an emergency. She stood on the wooden boardwalk, feeling the weight of her situation pressing down on her shoulders. The streets of Silverton were familiar, but offered no comfort. This town had been her home for her entire 22 years, but now it felt like a trap closing around her. "You look like you could use a drink or at least a friendly ear." Beatrice turned to find a man leaning against the post outside the telegraph office. He was tall and lean, with sun-bronzed skin and dark hair that fell just past his collar. He wore the typical garb of a working cowboy, dusty leather chaps over worn denim, a faded blue shirt, and a hat that had seen better days. But it was his eyes that caught her attention, a warm brown that held genuine concern rather than the leering interest she often encountered from men in town. "I am fine, thank you," she said automatically, though her voice lacked conviction. "You do not look fine," he observed, straightening from the post. "You look like someone carrying the weight of the world. I am Yates Kendrick, by the way. I work at the Triple Creek Ranch about 5 miles north of here." "Beatrice Garrett," she replied, deciding that there was no harm in basic politeness. "And I appreciate your concern, but my problems are not something that can be solved with a drink or conversation." Yates tilted his head, studying her with an intensity that should have made her uncomfortable, but somehow did not. "Try me. I've been told I'm a decent listener, and sometimes talking through a problem with a stranger can provide a fresh perspective." Beatrice hesitated. Everything she had been taught about propriety told her to excuse herself and return home immediately. But desperation made people do things they would not normally consider, and she found herself wanting to trust this stranger with the kind eyes and easy manner. "I am being pressured to marry a man I have never met," she said quietly. "He is demanding that I turn over my entire dowry before the wedding, and my father is desperate enough to agree because we are drowning in debt. I know it is wrong, but I cannot see a way out that does not hurt the people I love." Yates' expression darkened. "That is not just wrong. It is practically theft. No honorable man would make such a demand." "I know, but knowing it and being able to stop it are two different things." Beatrice wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly chilled despite the warm evening. "I have 3 days to decide." "What if there was another option?" Yates asked slowly, as if the idea was forming even as he spoke. "What if you did not have to choose between your inheritance and your family's security?" "I am listening." He glanced around, then gestured toward a small restaurant at the end of the street. "Let me buy you supper and we can talk properly. I have an idea, but it is going to sound strange at first." Against her better judgment, Beatrice found herself following Yates Kendrick to the restaurant. They took a table in the back corner where they could speak privately, and after ordering plates of beef stew and cornbread, Yates laid out his proposition. I need a wife," he said bluntly. "Or more accurately, I need to be married if I want to claim the land I've been working for the past 5 years. The owner of the Triple Creek Ranch, old Mr. Halstead, passed away last winter. He left a will stating that the foreman, which is me, could purchase the ranch at a significantly reduced price if I was married and could prove I was settling down permanently. If I cannot meet those conditions within 6 months, the property goes to his nephew in St. Louis, who will almost certainly sell it to a mining company." Beatrice frowned. "I do not understand how that helps my situation." "I am proposing a marriage of convenience," Yates explained. "You marry me instead of this Patterson fellow. You keep complete control of your dowry, I get the ranch, and we figure out how to help your family with their debts using a portion of the money I will save by purchasing the property at the reduced rate. After a year or two, once everything is settled, we can quietly divorce if we choose, or we can make it work as a real marriage. Either way, you are not handing over your inheritance to a stranger who has already shown he cannot be trusted." Beatrice stared at him, trying to process what he was suggesting. "You are proposing that I marry you, another stranger, based on a 10-minute conversation outside a telegraph office?" "I know it sounds insane," Yates admitted, "but think about it practically. I am not asking for your money. In fact, I am offering to help you use it to solve your family's problems while still keeping it under your control. I have a reputation in this town. You can ask anyone about me, and they will tell you I am honest and hardworking. I'm not a perfect man, but I'm not a con artist either." "Why would you do this?" Beatrice asked. "Why would you help someone you just met?" Yates was quiet for a moment, his fingers drumming thoughtfully on the table. "My mother was in a situation similar to yours once. She was pressured into a marriage that nearly destroyed her. She got lucky and my father turned out to be a decent man, but it could have gone very differently. I watched her struggle with having no power over her own life, and I swore I would never stand by and watch another woman go through that if I could help. Maybe that makes me sound like some kind of knight in a dime novel, but it is the truth." Their food arrived, and they ate in silence for a few minutes while Beatrice turned his proposal over in her mind. It was risky and unconventional, but it was also the only option she had been presented that did not require her to sacrifice either her inheritance or her family's well-being. "How do I know I can trust you?" she finally asked. "You do not," Yates said honestly. "Not yet, but I am willing to put everything in writing. We can draw up a contract with a lawyer that specifies exactly what we are both agreeing to. Your money stays yours. We help your father clear his debts. I get the ability to purchase the ranch, and after that we see where things stand. If you want to leave, you can leave with your full inheritance intact." Beatrice set down her spoon, her appetite gone. "This is absolutely insane." "Probably," Yates agreed with a slight smile. "But is it more insane than handing your money over to Patterson and hoping for the best?" She had to concede the point. At least with Yates's proposal, she would maintain control over her own future. And there was something about him, some quality she could not quite name, that made her want to trust him despite the absurdity of the situation. "I need to think about it," she said, "and I need to verify what you have told me about your situation and your reputation." "Absolutely. Talk to anyone in town. Go to the land office and check on the status of the Triple Creek Ranch. Take whatever time you need, though I know you do not have much of it." Yates pulled a small piece of paper from his pocket and scribbled an address. "This is where you can find me if you decide you want to proceed, or if you just need someone to talk to who is not trying to pressure you into anything." They finished their meal with lighter conversation, and Beatrice found herself surprised by how easy it was to talk to Yates. He told her about his work on the ranch, about the horses he trained and the land he loved. She found herself sharing stories about her siblings and her dreams of one day opening a bakery, something she had never had the courage or capital to pursue. When he walked her back toward her home, stopping at a discreet distance so as not to cause gossip, Beatrice felt lighter than she had in months. "Thank you," she said, "for the meal and the conversation, if nothing else." "You are welcome. And Beatrice? Whatever you decide, I hope you do not let anyone pressure you into giving up what is rightfully yours. You deserve better than that." She watched him walk away into the darkness, his tall figure eventually disappearing around a corner. Then she turned and made her way home, her mind spinning with possibilities. Over the next 2 days, Beatrice did exactly what Yates had suggested. She spoke to shopkeepers, ranch hands, and anyone else who might have information about Yates Kendrick. The picture that emerged was consistent and reassuring. Everyone described him as honest, hard-working, and fair in his dealings. Several people mentioned that he had gone out of his way to help neighbors in need, never asking for anything in return. She also went to the land office and confirmed his story about the Triple Creek Ranch. The clerk showed her the relevant documents, including Mr. Halstead's will with its stipulation about marriage. Everything Yates had told her was true. On the evening of the second day, Beatrice sat down with her father and told him about Yates's proposal. She expected anger or dismissal, but instead, her father looked relieved. "I have heard of Yates Kendrick," he said slowly. "Good reputation. I've seen him in church on Sundays. If what you are telling me is true, this sounds like a far better arrangement than what Patterson was offering." "You would be comfortable with me marrying someone I barely know?" Beatrice asked, surprised by his reaction. Her father sighed. "I am not comfortable with any of this, Bea. But if you must marry, I would rather it be to someone local, someone whose character can be vouched for, and someone who is offering you terms that do not require you to hand over everything you have on blind faith. At least this way, you stay nearby. And if things do not work out, you will have resources to fall back on." The next morning, Beatrice sent word to Mr. Patterson through her father that she would not be accepting his proposal. She did not wait to hear his response. Instead, she put on her best dress, a simple but well-made blue cotton that her mother had sewn years ago, and made her way to the address Yates had given her. The Triple Creek Ranch was everything Yates had described and more. The main house was a sturdy 2-story structure with a wide porch that overlooked rolling pastureland dotted with cattle and horses. Outbuildings in good repair surrounded the house, and everything spoke of a well-maintained property that had been loved and cared for. Yates was working with a young horse in a corral when she arrived. He moved with easy confidence, his voice low and soothing as he encouraged the animal to accept a saddle. When he spotted Beatrice, he tied off the horse and walked over to meet her, pulling off his work gloves. "You came," he said, and she could hear both relief and nervousness in his voice. "I did. I have thought about your proposal, and I have checked your references. I want to proceed, but I need certain things in writing first." Yates broke into a genuine smile. "Of course. I already arranged for us to meet with a lawyer this afternoon if you were agreeable. We can outline everything you want included in the contract." They rode into town together in Yates's wagon and spent the next 3 hours in the lawyer's office hammering out the details of their agreement. Beatrice insisted on clauses that protected her inheritance, specified the amount that would be used to help clear her father's debts, outlined her rights to leave the marriage if she chose, and detailed what would happen to the property if they divorced. Yates agreed to everything without argument and added clauses of his own that protected her interests even further. By the time they finished, Beatrice felt confident that she was making the right decision, even if it was an unusual one. "When should we do this?" she asked as they left the lawyer's office with signed contracts in hand. "As soon as possible," Yates replied. "I only have 4 months left to meet the conditions of the will, and we need time to make the arrangement look legitimate, but I do not want you to feel rushed. If you need more time to prepare, we can wait a week or 2. Beatrice thought about Mr. Patterson, who might still be lurking around town looking for another opportunity to press his case. She thought about her father's creditors and the fear in Margaret's eyes. She thought about the future she had always imagined for herself and how different this reality was turning out to be. "Let us do it this week," she said. "There is no point in delaying." They were married 4 days later in a small ceremony at the church with only immediate family and a few friends in attendance. Beatrice wore her mother's wedding dress, altered to fit her smaller frame. Yates wore a new suit that he admitted he had purchased specifically for the occasion, looking uncomfortable but handsome in the formal attire. When the preacher asked if she took Yates to be her lawfully wedded husband, Beatrice looked into his brown eyes and saw only honesty and hope. She said yes without hesitation and meant it more than she had expected to. The kiss that sealed their vows was brief and chaste, but Beatrice felt a flutter of something unexpected in her chest. This was her husband now, this kind stranger who had offered her a choice when she had none. They held a small reception at the ranch afterward. Beatrice's siblings seemed awed by the size and beauty of the property. Margaret kept whispering questions about whether this was really going to be their new home, and their brother Thomas was fascinated by the horses. "They can visit whenever they want," Yates assured Beatrice quietly. "This is your home now, which means they are always welcome." That first night as a married couple was awkward, but not unpleasant. Yates had prepared the main bedroom for Beatrice and offered to sleep in one of the smaller rooms until she was comfortable sharing a space with him. "We are married," Beatrice said, surprised by his consideration. "People will expect us to share a room." "People can expect whatever they want," Yates replied. "I told you this marriage would be on your terms, and I meant it. We can take this as slowly as you need." In the end, they compromised. They shared the large bedroom, but Yates set up a small cot on the far side of the room, giving them privacy while maintaining the appearance of a normal marriage. It was strange falling asleep knowing there was another person in the room, but not uncomfortable. The next few weeks passed in a blur of adjustment. Beatrice learned the rhythms of ranch life, discovering that she enjoyed many aspects of it. She took over management of the household, working with Maria, the housekeeper who had stayed on after Mr. Halstead's death. She started a vegetable garden and began experimenting with the large kitchen, finding joy in baking bread and pies that Yates and the ranch hands devoured with enthusiasm. True to his word, Yates used the funds saved from purchasing the ranch at the reduced rate to help clear her father's debts. Within a month, the Garrett family was on stable financial footing again, and the relief on her father's face made Beatrice feel that she had made the right choice. She also found herself genuinely enjoying Yates's company. He was intelligent and funny, with a dry wit that caught her off guard and made her laugh. He taught her to ride properly, patiently correcting her form and cheering when she successfully completed her first long ride without assistance. In turn, she taught him some of her mother's recipes and discovered he had a surprising talent for baking, though he made her promise never to tell the ranch hands. "I have a reputation to maintain," he said with mock seriousness as he pulled a perfect apple pie from the oven. "If word gets out that I can bake, I will never hear the end of it." Physical affection developed gradually between them. At first, it was just a hand at her elbow as he helped her into the wagon or his arm around her shoulders when they sat together in church. Then came tentative hand-holding during evening walks around the property and soft kisses goodnight that began to linger a bit longer each time. 2 months into their marriage, Beatrice woke in the middle of the night to find Yates sitting on the edge of his cot, his head in his hands. She could see his shoulders shaking and realized with shock that he was crying. "Yates?" she whispered, crossing the room to kneel beside him. "What is wrong?" He looked up, and even in the dim moonlight filtering through the window, she could see the anguish on his face. "I got word today that my mother passed. She's been sick for a while, and I knew it was coming, but I thought I would have more time. I thought I could bring you to meet her, show her that I was settling down like she always wanted. But now she is gone." Beatrice felt her heart break for him. Without thinking, she wrapped her arms around him, pulling his head against her shoulder. "I'm so sorry. I wish I could have met her. From everything you have told me, she sounded like a remarkable woman." They stayed like that for a long time, Yates's quiet grief filling the room while Beatrice held him and murmured soft words of comfort. When he finally exhausted his tears, he looked at her with red-rimmed eyes. Thank you," he said hoarsely, "for being here, for not judging me for falling apart." "You are allowed to grieve," Beatrice said softly. "You do not have to be strong all the time." Something shifted between them that night. The walls they had both been carefully maintaining began to crumble. Yates told her about his childhood, about his mother's strength and his father's gentleness. Beatrice shared her own stories of loss, of watching her mother fade away and trying to hold her family together in the aftermath. "I think your mother would have been proud of you," Beatrice said as dawn began to break outside. "You have built something good here, and you offered help to someone who desperately needed it when you had no obligation to do so. That speaks to the kind of man she raised." Yates reached out and took her hand, threading his fingers through hers. "I want you to know that this has become more than just a business arrangement for me. I have developed real feelings for you, Beatrice. I understand if you do not feel the same way, but I needed you to know." Beatrice's breath caught in her throat. She had been trying not to examine her own feelings too closely, afraid of what she might discover. But hearing Yates's confession made her realize that she had been falling for him too, gradually and inevitably, like water wearing down stone. "I have feelings for you too," she admitted. "I did not expect to, but I do. You are kind and patient and honorable in ways I did not think men could be. This started as a practical arrangement, but it has become something real for me as well." Yates leaned forward and kissed her, not the chaste pecks they had been exchanging, but a real kiss full of longing and promise. Beatrice responded without hesitation, her hands coming up to cup his face as they poured months of restrained emotion into that single moment. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Yates rested his forehead against hers. "I want this to be a real marriage, if you do. Not just on paper, but in every way." "So do I," Beatrice whispered. That night, the cot was quietly moved to storage, and they shared the large bed as a true married couple for the first time. It was awkward and tender and perfect in the way that first times often are. Afterward, lying in Yates's arms with her head on his chest, Beatrice felt a contentment she had never known before. "Are you happy?" Yates asked, his fingers tracing idle patterns on her shoulder. "I am," Beatrice said, surprised by how much she meant it. "I never imagined I could be this happy given how everything started. I am glad I was standing outside that telegraph office the night you needed someone," Yates said. "I do not believe in fate particularly, but I cannot help thinking we were meant to find each other." The following months brought both challenges and joys. Yates successfully completed the purchase of the Triple Creek Ranch, and Beatrice insisted that her name be added to the deed as well. He agreed without hesitation, making it truly their shared property. The ranch prospered under their combined management. Beatrice proved to have a sharp head for business, helping Yates negotiate better prices for their cattle and establishing contracts with suppliers that saved them significant money. She also started selling her baked goods in town, using a portion of her inheritance to fund a small storefront that quickly became popular with locals and travelers passing through Silverton. Margaret came to stay with them for the summer, helping in the bakery and learning to ride under Yates's patient instruction. Thomas visited on weekends, and Beatrice watched with joy as her husband formed a genuine bond with her younger brother, teaching him about ranching and treating him with the same respect he would give a grown man. But it was not all easy. There were disagreements about how to run the ranch, arguments about money and responsibility that sometimes left them both frustrated. Yates had a tendency to be overprotective, something Beatrice chafed against. She'd been taking care of herself and her family for years and did not appreciate being treated as fragile. Their first real fight happened 6 months into their marriage when Beatrice announced she wanted to travel to Denver to meet with a supplier about expanding her bakery business. "Absolutely not," Yates said flatly. "Denver is 3 days away and you would be traveling alone. It is too dangerous." "I am perfectly capable of taking a stagecoach to Denver by myself," Beatrice replied, her voice tight with anger. "I'm not a child who needs permission. I never said you were, but I am your husband, and I have a right to be concerned about your safety." "You are my husband, not my owner," Beatrice shot back. "I kept my independence when I married you, remember? That was part of our agreement." The argument escalated until Beatrice stormed out of the house and spent the night in the barn, too angry to share a room with Yates. She lay in the hayloft, tears of frustration streaming down her face, wondering if she had made a terrible mistake. But in the morning, Yates came to find her. He looked exhausted, like he had not slept at all. "You are right," he said without preamble. "I was being controlling and I apologize. You are your own person, and you have every right to make decisions about your business without my permission. I let my fear for your safety override my respect for your independence, and that was wrong." Beatrice sat up, brushing hay from her hair. "I appreciate your concern for my safety, truly. But you have to trust that I can take care of myself. I've been doing it for a long time. I know, and I do trust you. So here's my compromise. Go to Denver and handle your business, but let me come with you, not as a keeper but as a companion. We can make it a trip together, and I promise to stay out of your business meetings unless you want my input." It was a fair offer, and Beatrice accepted. Their trip to Denver ended up being wonderful. Beatrice successfully negotiated her supplier contract while Yates explored the city. In the evenings, they ate at nice restaurants and attended a theater performance, things neither of them had experienced much of before. The trip became an adventure they shared, strengthening their bond rather than straining it. By their first anniversary, Beatrice could hardly remember what her life had been like before Yates. He had become her partner in every sense of the word, someone she trusted completely and loved deeply. The physical attraction between them had grown into something profound, a connection that went beyond mere affection. They celebrated their anniversary with a picnic on a hill overlooking the ranch. Beatrice had prepared all of Yates's favorite foods, and he had picked wildflowers that he wove into a crown for her hair. "I never thanked you properly," Beatrice said as they lay on their blanket watching clouds drift across the brilliant blue sky. "For offering me a choice when I had none. For seeing me as a person rather than a transaction. For becoming someone I could love." Yates rolled onto his side to face her, his expression serious. "You do not need to thank me for treating you like a human being. That should be the baseline, not something worthy of gratitude. But I will say that marrying you was the best decision I ever made. You have made this place a home. You have made my life full in ways I did not know were possible." "I love you," Beatrice said, the words coming easily now, though they had been terrifying the first time she said them months ago. "I love you too," Yates replied, leaning in to kiss her. "More than I thought possible." That fall, Beatrice discovered she was pregnant. The news filled her with joy and terror in equal measure. She had always wanted children, but the reality of bringing a new life into the world was daunting. Yates was ecstatic, but tried to hide his excitement when he saw her anxiety. "We will figure this out together," he promised, "just like we have figured out everything else." The pregnancy was difficult. Beatrice struggled with sickness that lasted well beyond the first few months. There were days when she could barely get out of bed, and Yates took over running both the ranch and the bakery with help from Maria and hired staff. He never complained, never made her feel guilty for being unable to handle her usual responsibilities. "You are growing a human being inside you," he said when she apologized for the 100th time. "That's more important than anything else right now." In April of 1877, on a warm spring morning, Beatrice gave birth to a healthy baby boy after 18 hours of labor. They named him Henry, after Yates's father, and the moment Beatrice held her son for the first time, she understood a depth of love she had never known existed. Yates was utterly besotted with his son. Beatrice would often find him in the nursery at odd hours, just watching Henry sleep with an expression of wonder on his face. "I cannot believe we made this," he would whisper. "He is perfect." Those early months with a newborn were exhausting. Beatrice was grateful for Maria's help and for her sister Margaret, who came to stay for several weeks to assist with the baby and the household. But it was Yates who surprised her the most. He changed diapers without complaint, walked the floor with a crying Henry for hours when Beatrice needed rest, and learned to soothe the baby with a skill that seemed to come naturally. "You are an amazing father," Beatrice told him one night as she watched him rock Henry to sleep while humming a soft tune. "I am trying to be the kind of father I wish every child could have," Yates replied, "the kind who is present and engaged and never makes his children feel like burdens." When Henry was 6 months old and life had settled into a new routine, Beatrice reopened her bakery with modified hours that allowed her to balance motherhood and business. She hired additional help, including a young woman named Sarah who showed real talent for baking. The business continued to thrive, even expanding to include a small cafe where people could sit and enjoy coffee with their pastries. Life had a beautiful rhythm to it now. Mornings were spent with Henry, watching him discover the world with wide-eyed wonder. Afternoons were devoted to the bakery, where Beatrice found fulfillment in creating things with her hands and building a successful enterprise. Evenings were for family, for dinners with Yates, where they talked about their days and made plans for the future. Beatrice's father became a regular visitor, his relationship with Yates growing into genuine friendship. He often said that his greatest regret was how he had almost forced Beatrice into a disastrous marriage, and his greatest relief was that she had found a way to something better. "You have built a good life here," he told her during one visit when Henry was learning to walk. "Your mother would be so proud of who you have become." When Henry was 2 years old, Beatrice discovered she was pregnant again. This pregnancy was easier than the first, perhaps because she knew what to expect, or perhaps because her body had learned how to do this. In December of 1879, she gave birth to a daughter they named Rose. If Yates had been smitten with Henry, he was absolutely enchanted by Rose. His daughter wrapped him around her tiny finger from the moment she was born. Beatrice would often find him making ridiculous faces just to hear Rose giggle, or reading her stories in different voices even before she was old enough to understand the words. "I always wanted a daughter," he admitted one night as he held Rose against his chest, her tiny hand curled around his finger. "I wanted the chance to raise a girl who knows she is strong and capable and deserving of respect, who will never doubt her own worth." "She will know," Beatrice assured him. "With us as her parents, she will definitely know." The years flowed by with the kind of gentle rhythm that marked a happy life. Henry grew into a bright, curious boy who loved the ranch and the animals. Rose proved to be fearless and determined, traits that both delighted and terrified her parents in equal measure. The Triple Creek Ranch prospered, earning a reputation as one of the best-run properties in the region. Beatrice's Bakery became a landmark in Silverton, a place where locals gathered not just for the excellent food, but for the sense of community she had fostered. But their happiness was not without trials. When Henry was 7, he became seriously ill with a fever that the doctor could not initially identify. For 3 terrifying days, Beatrice and Yates took turns sitting by his bedside, placing cool cloths on his forehead and praying that he would recover. Yates barely slept, his face drawn with fear and exhaustion. "We cannot lose him," he said to Beatrice during one of their vigils. "I do not know how to survive that." "We will not lose him," Beatrice said with more confidence than she felt. "He is strong. He is going to be fine." And he was. The fever broke on the 4th day, and Henry slowly recovered his strength, but the experience reminded them both of how fragile life could be, how quickly everything they loved could be threatened. It also brought them closer together, if that was even possible. They had weathered so many storms together by this point. The difficult early days of their marriage, the challenges of pregnancy and parenthood, the normal struggles of running a business and a ranch, each obstacle had been met and overcome together, strengthening the foundation of their relationship. On their 10th anniversary, Yates took Beatrice back to the hill where they had celebrated their first year together. The children were with Margaret for the evening, giving them a rare night alone. "I have been thinking about that day outside the telegraph office," Yates said as they watched the sunset paint the sky in brilliant colors. "About how desperate you looked, and how insane my proposal must have seemed. I keep wondering what would have happened if you had walked away, if you had decided I was just another person trying to take advantage of you." "But I did not walk away," Beatrice replied, lacing her fingers through his. "I took a chance on you, and you proved worthy of that trust. You gave me more than just a way out of a bad situation. You gave me a partnership, a family, and a life I could not have imagined for myself." "You gave me those things too," Yates said. "Before you, I had a job and a goal, but no real purpose. You made this place a home. You gave me children I would die for. You showed me what it means to build a life with someone rather than just existing alongside them." They made love under the stars that night, a celebration of everything they had built together and everything they still hoped to create. At 45 and 32 respectively, they were no longer the young people who had entered into a marriage of convenience a decade earlier. They had been shaped by time and experience into a unit, 2 individuals who had chosen each other every day for 10 years. The next few years brought more changes. Thomas, now grown, came to work at the ranch full-time, having discovered a genuine love for cattle ranching. Margaret married a schoolteacher and moved to a nearby town, though she remained close with Beatrice and visited often. Beatrice's father passed away peacefully in his sleep at the age of 70, and though she mourned him, she was grateful that his last years had been free from the financial stress that had nearly destroyed him. Henry showed an aptitude for business and began helping manage the ranch accounts when he was just 13. Rose declared at age 10 that she intended to be a veterinarian, a profession that barely existed for women, but which Yates and Beatrice encouraged nonetheless. "If you want to be a veterinarian, then you will be a veterinarian," Yates told his daughter firmly. "Your mother and I did not work this hard to build something good, just so you could be told what you can and cannot do." When Beatrice was 40, she surprised everyone, including herself, by becoming pregnant again. The pregnancy was unexpected, but not unwelcome, though her doctor warned her that complications were more common for women her age. Yates worried constantly, hovering over her in a way that was both annoying and endearing. "I am pregnant, not made of glass," Beatrice reminded him regularly. "I have done this twice before, remember?" But this pregnancy was different. Beatrice felt more tired, and the aches and pains seemed more pronounced. When she went into labor a month early, fear gripped both her and Yates. The birth was difficult, the longest and most painful of the three, and there were moments when the doctor's face looked grim enough to terrify her. But in the end, she delivered a healthy baby girl, smaller than her siblings had been, but strong and loud. They named her Grace because she felt like an unexpected blessing in their middle years. Henry, now 15, proved to be wonderful with his baby sister. Rose, at 13, was less interested in infant care, but fiercely protective of her new sibling. Watching her older children with Grace filled Beatrice with profound gratitude for the family she and Yates had created. As Grace grew from infant to toddler, Beatrice found herself reflecting on the journey that had brought her to this moment. She thought about the terrified young woman she had been at 22, standing outside a telegraph office with no good options and a future that seemed bleak. She thought about the leap of faith she had taken, trusting a stranger with kind eyes and an unusual proposal. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked Yates one evening as they sat on their porch, watching Grace toddle around the yard while Henry and Rose kept watchful eyes on her. "The way we started, I mean. The fact that our marriage began as a business arrangement." Yates considered the question seriously. "No. I think the way we started made us stronger in some ways. We built this relationship deliberately, brick by brick. We chose each other not out of passion or infatuation, but out of mutual respect and shared goals. And then love grew from that foundation in a way that feels more solid than if we had rushed into marriage based on attraction alone." "I feel the same way," Beatrice agreed, "though I have to admit there's plenty of attraction now." Yates laughed, the sound rich and warm in the evening air. "There certainly is. 20 years married, and I still find you as beautiful as the day I first saw you looking lost outside that telegraph office." 20 years, Beatrice repeated wonderingly. "Sometimes it feels like yesterday, and sometimes it feels like we have always been together." Their youngest daughter's childhood passed in a blur of joy. Grace proved to be a happy, easy child who adored her older siblings and brought lightness to their home. Henry went off to college in Denver, studying business with plans to eventually expand the ranch operations. Rose, true to her word, was accepted into a veterinary program in St. Louis, one of the first women in the West to pursue such education. As Beatrice approached 50, she made the decision to step back from daily management of the bakery, turning operations over to Sarah, who had been with her for nearly 20 years. She maintained ownership but trusted her longtime employee to handle the day-to-day decisions. "I want to enjoy this stage of my life," she told Yates. "I want to spend time with Grace before she grows up too fast. I want to travel with you to places we have never been. I want to be present for all of it." They began taking trips together, leaving the ranch in Thomas's capable hands for weeks at a time. They visited Rose in St. Louis, marveling at the woman their daughter had become. They traveled to San Francisco and stood at the edge of the Pacific Ocean, holding hands as they watched the sun set over water. They went to Santa Fe to visit Beatrice's aunt, who was delighted to finally meet the man who had saved her niece from disaster all those years ago. "You chose well," her aunt told Beatrice privately. "That's a good man who loves you truly." "I know," Beatrice replied with a smile. "I've known for a long time." When Grace was 12, Henry returned from Denver with a wife, a lovely young woman named Catherine, who quickly became part of the family. They settled in a house on the ranch property, and Henry took over more of the daily operations, allowing Yates to transition into a more advisory role. "I'm getting old," Yates joked when Beatrice teased him about becoming less hands-on with the ranch work. "Let the young people do the heavy lifting." But he was not really that old, just 56 and still strong and healthy. He simply wanted the same thing Beatrice did, to enjoy their life together without being consumed by constant work. Rose graduated from veterinary school and opened a practice in Silverton, becoming one of the few female veterinarians in Colorado. She remained unmarried, much to the dismay of various townsfolk who thought a woman her age should be focused on finding a husband. "I am focused on my work," Rose told her parents firmly. "If I meet someone who can accept that my career is important to me, then perhaps I will marry. But I refuse to give up what I have worked so hard to achieve for the sake of social expectations." "Good," Yates said proudly. "Never compromise who you are for anyone." Grace, their baby, grew into a thoughtful and creative teenager who loved music and poetry. She showed no interest in ranching or business, preferring to spend her time reading and writing in journals she filled with her observations about the world. "She is so different from Henry and Rose," Beatrice observed to Yates one evening. "Sometimes I wonder if she feels out of place in our family of ranchers and business people." "She is exactly where she belongs," Yates replied. "We taught all our children to be true to themselves. Grace is doing just that. Besides, who says our family legacy has to only be about ranches and businesses? Maybe Grace will write something that touches people's souls. That seems just as valuable to me." In 1897, on their 25th anniversary, the entire family gathered for a celebration at the ranch. Henry and Catherine brought their 2 young children. Rose came from her veterinary practice. Thomas, now married with children of his own, brought his whole family. Margaret and her husband drove in from their town. The house was full of noise and laughter and love. During the celebration, Henry stood and raised his glass. "I want to make a toast to my parents," he said, his voice carrying across the crowded room, "to 2 people who showed me what partnership really looks like, who built something lasting not just in business but in family, who proved that the best relationships are built on respect and trust and the choice to love each other every single day. Thank you for giving us a foundation we can all build our own lives on." Beatrice felt tears streaming down her face as everyone echoed the toast. She looked at Yates and saw that his eyes were wet too. "We did well," he said quietly, just for her. "Look at what we built." "We did," Beatrice agreed. "We did very well indeed." The years continued to pass, bringing the changes that time always brings. Beatrice's hair turned silver, and lines appeared around Yates's eyes and mouth, but they aged together, their love deepening rather than fading with time. They became grandparents again and again as their children built families of their own. The ranch continued to prosper under Henry's management. Rose's veterinary practice became renowned throughout the region. Grace published her first book of poetry when she was 23, earning acclaim for her vivid descriptions of Western life. When Beatrice was 67 and Yates 74, they sat together on their porch one summer evening, watching yet another Colorado sunset paint the sky in impossible colors. Their hands were clasped together as they always were, fingers intertwined with the ease of long practice. "Do you remember that night outside the telegraph office?" Beatrice asked, a question that had become something of a ritual between them over the years. "Of course," Yates replied. "You looked like you were carrying the weight of the world, and something in me just knew I had to help you." "You saved me that night," Beatrice said softly. "You gave me a choice when I had none, and that choice led to this beautiful life we built together." "You saved me too," Yates countered. "You took a broken arrangement meant to secure property and turned it into a love story. You gave me a family and a purpose beyond just working land. You made every day worth living." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the stars begin to emerge in the darkening sky. The sounds of the ranch surrounded them, familiar and beloved. Inside the house, they could hear Grace helping prepare dinner, her voice raised in song as she worked. "I would do it all again exactly the same way," Beatrice said. "Every difficult moment, every challenge, every uncertainty, because it led us here." "So would I," Yates agreed, bringing her hand to his lips and kissing it gently. "Every single moment." As the evening deepened into night, they remained on the porch, 2 people who had chosen each other 45 years ago and had continued choosing each other every day since. Their marriage had begun with pressure and desperation, with a dowry threatened and a stranger's unusual proposal. But it had grown into something profound and enduring, a testament to what could be built when 2 people respected each other and worked together toward common goals. The cowboy had offered a different choice all those years ago, and Beatrice had been brave enough to take it. That single decision, made in desperation on a dusty street in Silverton, had changed the trajectory of both their lives. It had led them through challenges and triumphs, through the raising of children and the building of businesses, through loss and joy and all the ordinary moments that make up a life well lived. They had started as strangers bound by a contract. They had become partners, then lovers, then parents. And finally, after decades of choosing each other day after day, they had become something that transcended all those roles. They had become proof that love could be built deliberately, that respect and trust could be the foundation for something lasting and true. As the stars wheeled overhead and the Colorado night settled around them, Yates and Beatrice Kendrick sat together in the home they had made, surrounded by the family they had raised, secure in the knowledge that they had made something beautiful out of impossible circumstances. The woman who had been pressured to give her dowry before marriage had instead found a cowboy who offered her a different choice, and that choice had made all the difference. Their story had begun with fear and uncertainty, but it had become a legacy of love, one that would be carried forward by their children and grandchildren and all the generations yet to come. It was a reminder that sometimes the most extraordinary love stories begin with the simple act of offering someone a choice when they have none, and having the courage to trust a stranger who sees you as more than a transaction. As they finally rose to go inside for the night, Yates held the door open for Beatrice, and she paused to kiss him, a gesture as natural and necessary as breathing after all these years. "I love you," she said, words that had been spoken between them thousands of times but never lost their meaning. "I love you too," Yates replied. "Always have, always will." They walked into their home together, hand in hand, ready for whatever days remained to them, secure in the knowledge that they had found in each other everything they had ever needed. The transaction had become a partnership. The partnership had become love, and the love had become a life that neither of them would have chosen differently if given the chance to start over. The dowry that had nearly been stolen from Beatrice had instead been protected, used wisely to build something lasting. The cowboy who had offered a different choice had proven himself worthy of the trust placed in him, and together they had created a story that would be told for generations, a reminder that love could bloom even in the most unlikely circumstances when two people chose to honor and respect each other. Their children would tell their grandchildren about the unusual beginning to their parents' marriage. Those grandchildren would tell their own children, and the story would live on, a testament to the power of choice, the importance of respect, and the enduring nature of love built on a solid foundation of trust and partnership. In the end, that was their legacy. Not just the ranch or the bakery or the success they had achieved, but the example they set of what marriage could be when entered into with honesty and maintained with consistent effort and genuine affection. They had shown that arranged marriages did not have to be loveless, that partnerships could become passion, and that choosing someone every day was more powerful than simply falling in love once. As the lights in the ranch house were extinguished one by one and the Kendrick family settled in for the night, the land around them held the history of all they had built. Every fence post, every building, every tree in the orchard represented years of shared labor and mutual dedication. The Triple Creek Ranch was more than just property. It was a physical manifestation of what two people could create when they worked together toward common goals. And in the master bedroom of the main house, Yates and Beatrice Kendrick fell asleep as they had every night for 45 years, with her head on his shoulder and his arm wrapped protectively around her waist. They dreamed peaceful dreams of the life they had lived and the legacy they would leave, content in the knowledge that they had made the right choice all those years ago on a dusty street in Silverton, Colorado, when a pressured woman and a compassionate cowboy decided to take a chance on each other. The story that had begun with desperation and an unconventional proposal had transformed into something beautiful and enduring, proof that the best love stories are not always the ones that start with passion, but sometimes the ones that start with respect and grow into something that time cannot diminish.